during that process, we set up Community Energy South as a support mechanism for community energy across the southeast of England, really focused for the region. And today, we're a team of between 5 and 8, and we act as a voice for the sector across the regions. We do quite a bit of lobbying to the government. We look at capacity building for local and community energy and innovation and new energy business models. And so these monthly masterclasses are all about that, about bringing everybody together that's interested in community energy and linking you all up and sharing best practice and getting the debate going. Well, I've run a bit of, this is the area that we run in, that covers sort of our mission has always been to help educate communities to use less oil and gas and support communities and new communities. So we build partnerships for the sector, and at the moment we're working very closely with UK Power Networks, obviously Community Energy England, Network Rail, South Downs National Park in Hampshire, and Southern Gas Networks, and the regional energy hubs and bays obviously as well. And so those partnerships are really important for the sector. We've been doing a lot of work over the last couple of years with all the distribution networks in the UK and also the water companies, and you know how infrastructure aligns with community energy, you know, so, and how our goals seem quite aligned with the infrastructure in particular, and in that they're very keen to engage with communities and, you know, and support net zero, and the community energy sector is there to do that. So there's a real alignment there. And we've got these pathways programs, so we're really excited. The main focus of our work really is currently up in Essex, Hampshire, and across the South Downs National Park, where we're mentoring new community energy groups. And we're hoping by the end of this year, we would have supported 15 existing or new groups to get up and running and develop their business plans, and working with those councils to support community energy. And that's very exciting. So a couple of very exciting groups to call out there. In Essex, the Saffron Walden Community Energy, who have now established and well into their business plan. And in Hampshire, we've got Petersfield Climate Action Network, Overton, Sustainable Overton, and who have just been awarded Rural Community Energy funding, and also Alton Energy, who are a really great group. So we're really excited to be working alongside them. Just to, in the coming months, a reminder to everybody, Community Energy England will be doing their annual State of the Sector report, and encourage all community energy groups to respond to that. It takes a little bit of a while, but what it does, it gives the whole sector a view over the UK. And last year, our 2030 vision for community energy predicted a 20 times growth in community energy sector. And with net zero, that's really important as well. So working with local authorities along that. And just finally, if you haven't joined Community Energy South or your community energy group, do, and sign up for our newsletter. It gives you access to these masterclasses, and you know, share it about. The more the merrier. We can spread the word. So thank you very much. Without further ado, I'll stop sharing and ask Liz to introduce the speakers this morning.
Okay, thank you, Ollie. Welcome everyone. We are next going to hear from Charles Purkess, who works for IT Empower. I personally have been aware of IT Empower for many years, and I'm very fond of it. But I will let Charles introduce IT Empower properly, because he's obviously going to be able to talk about it a lot more clearly than I will. I have to say, this session was supposed to be all about hydrogen. I think it is, but our two speakers tend to work more with the transport side of hydrogen than the heating side of hydrogen. But nevertheless, I think we're in for two really good speakers. So I'm looking forward to hearing from them. I'm handing over to you now, Charles.
All right, well, thank you very much, Liz. I'm just going to try and share my screen. So if you bear with me. I've got a very temperamental mouse, which just flicks all over the place at the moment, which is...
We're very sorry not to see your face as well.
Right, I don't know why you can't, actually. I've got...
I assumed it was because you've got some internet issues, but...
I have got internet issues. I've got it all collapsed.
Well, we'll just welcome your voice. Apparently your video is on, so who knows? Right,
you should be able to start seeing my slides at the moment.
If there's a problem with your slides, you can share it. You could send it to Jessie and she could share your slides.
Right, I may just do that, sorry. This is where it's nice to say, can you talk amongst yourselves? But it's more difficult to say.
Lots going on, so there's lots of people chatting in the chat box. You're about to start screen sharing.
Oh, well done. You're doing well.
Yeah, well
Great.
done. Oh, yeah.
Good. So I just need to...
Well, you put our logo up in the top left-hand corner. That's very good of you.
Those are important things. So, right, I think I'm here now. So thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you this morning. I'm going to introduce ITM Power and the company that is based in Sheffield and is focused on the design and manufacture of rapid response electrolysis systems. It's a big topic. It covers manufacturing, technology, products that are growing, new markets, new applications, and it's impossible to fit into 15 minutes. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cherry pick through these slides to give you a feel and a flavor for what we do. So essentially, ITM, we manufacture that box you see in the middle. It's an electrolyzer system. And what it does, it takes electrons and water, and it splits water into its constituent parts, hydrogen and oxygen. That's what an electrolyzer does. What our electrolyzers also do is to respond very quickly. We can turn up and down in under 2 seconds. So we can go from 20% to 100% and back down again in under 2 seconds. And that makes us a very useful, flexible load for the grid and to enable integration of renewable energy. So the company's been around since 2000. We're headquartered in Sheffield, as I said. We've just opened a very large gigawatt per annum production facility. And we've been, I've been with the company since 2008, and I'll describe my experience in the company. It's very much going up a long staircase. And at each step, you have a new product or a new performance, you have a new demonstration, you have a new collaboration, and then you go up another step. And occasionally you get to a landing and you look back and say, gosh, haven't we come a long way? And then you look up the other way and think, gosh, haven't we got a long way to go? And, I would describe the electrolyzer industry until very recently as being a cottage industry. It was an industry that was building products for clients who wanted to showcase the production of hydrogen. And it's now evolving very much into a standardized mass manufacture industry. It's changing enormously. And you'll see there a number of collaborations that we've engaged into. Now, as an electrolyzer manufacturer, we've had to be very much on the front foot in terms of developing the market applications of our products. And one of those has been mobility. And we own and operate the network of hydrogen refueling stations in the UK. We're the only company that owns and operates a network. That's been really there to push push the awareness and policy, in terms of policy, in terms of industry, in terms of consumers, to what is possible. Because if we didn't have those hydrogen refueling stations, we wouldn't have any fuel cell cars or buses in the UK. We've also been involved in projects for power to gas, where we're blending hydrogen into the gas distribution network. And we've been doing that in Germany for some years. We have a demonstration now at last, which is Ofgem funded at Kiel University, called High Deploy, which is with Cadent and Northern Gas Networks. And that's looking at the ability to put 20% blend by volume into the gas pipes without changing any of the cooking elements or the pipe work or boiler elements. And effectively looking at the gas pipes as the storage capacity that we already own. And that's the big, when you're looking at energy storage and the whole concept, what you're looking at here is vector conversion. We're converting electrons into hydrogen. With batteries, you're looking at also investing in the storage capacity, and that's what limits the usefulness of batteries in terms of megawatt hours and of course the costs. And if you can just convert the vector, then you're in a good place. And if you're looking at the vast range of applications and what the electrolyzer enables you to do, it's quite staggering. I love this diagram. To me, it sums up just how critical electrolysis is. And what it shows here is the benefits upstream with regards to renewable energy supply in terms of increasing the utilization, addressing network capacity constraints, but also, of course, on the network frequency control, maintaining the 50 hertz, on that challenging balancing act we have to undertake between supply and demand. And we have to keep that balance absolutely at the 50 hertz level. And if the wind blows and demand's low, we have to turn off the wind, and it's called curtailment. Our proposition is, instead of turning off the wind or turning off the solar, is to turn on an electrolyzer and mop up and convert the electrons that would otherwise be wasted and convert it into hydrogen and green hydrogen. And the proposition here is that the electrolyzer enables renewable energy to decarbonize those sectors and processes that traditionally use fossil fuel, to decarbonize and extend reach of renewable energy beyond the electron in the terms of a very green molecule, which of course is molecules form the vast majority of all energy used, but normally they come from fossil fuel. So there are some very large scale applications, the market's growing, and from an IPTM point of view, we're positioning ourselves for that very large global market in all those applications. The other factor which is changing rapidly is policy, and especially in Europe. The EU has now put aside vast amounts of money. It's stipulated targets for gigawatts of electrolysis producing green hydrogen around the world, sorry, in Europe. And there are countries within Europe that have taken upon themselves to state their own targets. And these are very big targets for electrolysis deployment. This is in some cases 2030, in some cases 2024. It's a vast amount of manufacturing, and it assumes a vast amount of scale up. And this is what ITM has been waiting for, I would say, for the last 15 years, and in terms of our positioning and how to be prepared for this market. I mentioned green hydrogen, and there are of course other sorts of hydrogen colors, if you like, blue, gray, brown, call it what you like. To me, everything else, anything that isn't green is actually brown. With the biggest challenge we have at the moment is in the climate fight, if you like, is the inertia from oil and gas companies who want to keep selling their product. The proposition for methane, for instance, is to, well, we'll take the carbon dioxide from that methane and we'll store it beneath the North Sea, which is all very well and good, but if you're going to make hydrogen from methane, you need 30% more methane in the first place to make up the energy difference. So it doesn't do much for your energy security. It also, of course, is a huge challenge when it comes to the controlling your greenhouse warming potential of methane upstream, which is 86 times worse of carbon dioxide. And you've then got to deal with the carbon dioxide and bury it in such a way that it's low risk. And the big challenge here is the enormous cost and the liability associated. Who's going to own that store? So I think carbon capture and the blue hydrogen is an almighty distraction from getting on with what we really need to focus on. And if you look at time scales, by the time carbon capture schemes take off, we're talking about mid-2030s probably, by which time electrolysis is going to be so huge and so cheap that will be the price of green hydrogen will be so much lower than that of blue. And there are all sorts of industry reports. I'll send out all these slides afterwards, and I'll add some additional ones that go into the pricing of green hydrogen from offshore renewable as well, and just show where industry is predicting these very large drops in power pricing costs. So at the beginning of the presentation, I showed a Linde logo. And Linde, the largest gas company in the world, they took a 20% stake in ITM back in 2019, and at the same time set up a joint venture with Linde Engineering. And Linde Engineering is EPC. It's all the technologies of Linde Group, from liquefaction to storage, compression systems, hydrogen fueling stations, ammonia production, all those types. And Linde, the head of innovation at Linde, looked at all the, he was tasked with looking for a green gas solution to the world's biggest gas company that normally is just sold steam reformation equipment to make hydrogen from methane. And he looked at pyrolysis, gasification technologies, he looked at alkaline electrolysis, looked at solid oxide, and looked at PEM. And he ended up with us at ITM to focus and chose us. And he said the reason why he chose ITM as a PEM electrolyzer manufacturer is that we have a very low risk stack architecture, proven stack architecture that can be scaled up to the scale that will necessitate and allow that those very large gigawatt scale production of green hydrogen moving forwards. I should say there's one big difference between alkaline electrolysis and PEM, and that is the electrolyte in an alkaline system is wet and caustic. The electrolyte in a PEM electrolyzer is a membrane. And ITM, we focus on the electrochemistry. So we design the catalyst, how to deposit on membranes, select the membranes, design a cell, design a stack, and design a system around that to optimize the system. And they come in various scales. So the smallest scale we manufacture is a 0.7 megawatt. In a containerized system, we go to about 4 megawatts in size. With the joint venture with Linde, ITM Linde Electrolysis, we manufacture everything up to gigawatt scale. It's a good solution for us because we can focus on building the technology, and they can focus on delivering technology, EPC, full turnkey solutions to industry globally. So this is the factory in Sheffield. We moved in January. It's absolutely enormous. It's the size of 2 football pitches. And it contains all these semi-automation equipment, the lean manufacturing processes to enable us to reach that target of gigawatt of electrolysis equipment to be produced from that factory a year. We also have funding for another factory as well, which will be taking the blueprint of this factory and building it elsewhere where that market demand is. So it's all about positioning in this industry because things are moving so fast. And of course, when you're building things at scale and increasing the output, improving the technology all the time, your costs are coming down. You can deal better with your suppliers, and we have a lot of leveraging buying power from Linde. And so the whole proposition, it turns into a real industry. And we can now compete with alkaline systems and all those old types of electrolysis equipment that's been around for years and years. We're building large scale kit. This is 100 megawatts, a front-end engineering design of Linde for the Humber with Phillips 66 and Orsted. So that's looking at refineries have to decarbonize. They use a lot of hydrogen from steam reformation for the desulfurization of fuel. Conscious of time, and I've probably overstepping my allotment, but very quickly on mobility, because this is probably one of the early low-hanging fruits for hydrogen use in the UK at the moment, and we've got a lot of experience. What you see there is a picture of a hydrogen refueling station, one of our 7, and that's a pump. It's pretty industrial, and I was, the way the industry is evolving is from taking industrial equipment, bolting it all together, and to make it low cost but available for people to refuel. I mean, it's not aesthetically pleasing, but all that will happen. And if you look at Shell and BP and all those type of big oil companies that are removing into the space, it's the aesthetic's going to come. So I mentioned we build and operate stations. We've had to really, we've taken funds from the EU, from the UK government. We've matched them so we can build all the components of a refueling station beyond the electrolyzer, so the storage, the compression, the dispensing equipment, the payment systems, and we have responsibility for how that system works. We've also developed codes of practice for the deployment of hydrogen refueling stations on petrol forecourts. And the picture you see there is of the M40 service station at Beaconsfield with Shell, where there's a hydrogen pump on the forecourt. And so we've had to really herd cats and bring in all the industry stakeholders, from the gas, the electronics, communications, the oil companies, to enable them to create a code of practice for the design, construction, operation, and maintenance of filling stations. And those stations we have a strategic siting agreement with Shell, but we also have a bus station in Birmingham, which has been commissioned this year. We've got a lot of support from end users of hydrogen vehicles in the UK, working very closely with Toyota and Hyundai and the bus companies as well. And these are some of our customers. So you'll see on the left, one of our hydrogen refueling stations, the Met Police refueling. Our name's on the pump, and it's on my phone ringing. That name on the pump means we are there to provide fuel reliably and have it available for when the consumer turns up. And it's something we've taken very, very seriously, because a hydrogen refueling station is a complex piece of equipment. It's like a mini chemical works, and it's not easy to do. And so we've developed a very critical operation and maintenance levels of support to ensure the reliability and availability of all those aspects of the refueling station operation. I'll let Beth talk about buses and fuel cell vehicles, but I've just got one slide I'd like to finish up on. So that's the layout at Birmingham and the stations we're commissioning, and there we've got couple of points for refueling buses, but also for cars. Buses fill up at 350 bar, cars 700 bar. But yes, it's quite an exciting development, which will be commissioning in May. I think the buses are arriving. So I just wanted to finish up with one slide on viability for hydrogen projects, bearing in mind the sorry, I think everything's ringing. Let me just turn it off. Right. Yeah. So just to finish up with, when planning hydrogen generation, there's a couple of key aspects that need to be considered. And one of them, because we get a lot of inquiries from renewable energy companies and people who own wind or solar or planning solar and wind. And the first question normally is, do you have a, sorry, everything's ringing, you can't hear it. Do you have a market for the hydrogen, an offtake? Because unless you have an offtake and someone who will purchase that hydrogen from you, there's no real point in having an electrolyzer. So being in a location that is attractive for a potential market for that hydrogen is important. Scale is also very important. And the larger systems you have, the better. And this is challenging with capacity factor. So for instance, if you look at PV capacity factor, say of 12%, if you want to make a lot of hydrogen from a PV array, you need to size the electrolyzer to optimize it for that window when the solar is productive. And likewise to the wind. So it's large scale, often mixes of wind and PV is best, is really important. The other aspect is links to utilities for power and water, and of course transport links if you're having the hydrogen collected. Ideally, in a dream world, you'd have your renewable energy close to your point of use, and we have some of our refueling stations we've actually located next to wind turbines, so that you can actually make the fuel from the wind and put it into the vehicle straight away. Yes, so there are a few challenges there. These challenges will go as demand goes up, and you know, at the moment we've got very little demand for hydrogen transport. It hasn't been incentivized by the government, but I'm aware it's changing fast. And you know, you're looking at trucks, trains, buses, vans, all converting to fuel cell because of the way it offers no compromise clean emission refueling for business operations. So things are changing big time. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of a flavour. I'm conscious I've probably overgone time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Charles, so much. I'm just, that was a very full, and from my point of view, an overview take on what's going on with hydrogen. We've got lots and lots of questions, and I'm conscious that you have to leave at 11. So I'm just wondering, let me just check in with Beth, who is our next speaker. Beth, can I see you there at all?
I'm here.
Do we want to give questions for Charles first? I think perhaps, given Charles has to...
I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
I'm happy with that. I don't have a hard stop, so no, by all means.
Right, well, my colleague Chris Rowland has been keeping an eye on the questions in the chat, and actually Chris had a question himself. So Chris, why don't you start with your question, and then we'll pull some of the questions out of the chat box and give people 15 minutes of 10 to 15 minutes of questions, and then we'll go on to Beth's presentation. Is that all right with everyone? I can't actually see if it is all right with everyone or not, so I'm getting...
It is with me.
Chris, are you still here?
I am. I'm looking back at my question. I was trying to keep a track on what was going on. I asked, it'd be interesting to hear what everyone thinks about the role of electricity and hydrogen, especially for EVs as we transition over the next 10 years and beyond, understanding the efficiency of converting green energy to hydrogen, the use of the existing gas network and what needs to be replaced to allow for hydrogen in the existing gas network. I think one of the things I'm particularly interested in is hydrogen for like heavy goods vehicles. And should we all, for private vehicles, be converting to electricity and using batteries? I can also see that in the life cycle of vehicles, what you do with the batteries at the end of that, hydrogen just produces water coming out of a pipe. So actually, in terms of the environment, there's an interesting question there. That's my quite a lot of questions there.
There is. So let me see if I can go through those. So first of all, I'll tackle the vehicles, because it's interesting that the electric vehicles, a fuel cell vehicle is an electric vehicle, effectively. If you look at how Toyota have evolved the Prius to the Mirai, so the Prius means precursor in Japanese, and it's a hybrid electric vehicle. So it's got an engine with the battery powertrain, and the engine charges up the battery powertrain, and it was the first hybrid vehicle on the market. Toyota then evolved that to the Mirai, so replacing the engine with a fuel cell. In order to develop fuel cell electric vehicles, you've got to first develop electric vehicles. You've got to perfect the electric powertrain, and that's the biggest challenge. That's why it's taking. You can't jump straight into hydrogen. You've got to have the power electronics, electric powertrain perfected first of all. So if you look at you mentioned vehicles, heavy vehicles, payload. The biggest challenges is to compromise the payload with batteries. I was chatting to someone from JLR a while ago, and they were saying that the problem with the four-wheel drives, the heavy utility vehicles for JLR, is that people need a heavy goods license if they want to drive them the way they usually want to drive them, because the battery, when you're looking at high power demand, is very, very heavy. So this is what the fuel cell and hydrogen avoids. The efficiency of conversion, the efficiencies are pretty high actually now. I'd say that you've had the traditional technologies, and then you've got the PEM technologies coming in. The traditional alkaline technologies are difficult to innovate. They need high temperature, so 80 degrees C to operate, and they can't ramp up and down. With PEM electrolysis, you can, I mentioned the fast response, but you can operate them at ambient temperature. They produce the hydrogen at pressure, so you don't have to invest in compression immediately from very low pressure, non-existent pressure that you have with alkaline. But also the footprint's very small and efficiencies are very high. And what we're striving to do at ITM is to enable our customers, clients, partners to make the lowest cost hydrogen in the future, because of the way the systems perform, and how you, if you're looking at hydrogen cost and trying to optimize the cost, it's about turning up the electrolyzer at times of the day when electricity is in surplus, lowest cost and greenest, as opposed to running it 24/7. So this provides a lot of flexibility in terms of the costs of the hydrogen output. So I'm straying a little bit into the costs in terms of CapEx and OpEx, but OpEx is critical. And if you can get local electricity cost, you can actually utilize the electricity that would otherwise be wasted. So I would argue the efficiency of electrolysis and that conversion efficiency is not an issue at all. With the PEM electrolyzers, it's about 70% at the moment, but we're striving much higher. We're lucky at ITM because we're vertically integrated, and we have control of all the components of electrochemistry. So we are constantly improving, and we have very ambitious targets to get efficiencies right up much, much higher than 70%.
Thank you. On the question of efficiencies, there's been lots of questions in the chat box about the efficiencies of hydrogen and That's about as technical as I get, but basically about how efficient hydrogen is, how truly low carbon it is. So I'm going to hand a question over to Danny from Pecan has put in about 3 or 4 questions about hydrogen efficiency. So perhaps Danny, you might like to ask your question and see if Charles can.
Yeah. Okay, where to start? Really quite tricky.
We don't have much time and we need to move on to Beth's presentation shortly.
Yeah, very quickly then. So Charles, as Danny from Pecan, yeah, difficult to couch this in simple terms. But you know, you look at the press, I hear what you say, but I have not found the clear comparative analysis of the hydrogen way forward versus other replacement technologies to do away with fossil fuels. I think it'd be nice to be able to see that so we can make an informed judgment. I'm not saying that you've given a sales pitch, but no surprise, you're pushing ITM Power's approach, which is great. And there's lots of benefits, I see that. And my second question is, have you looked at working with a community to provide a hydrogen network for a community of a particular size with your technology? If so, where and when? If not, why not?
Right, okay. So going back to the efficiencies, I mean, efficiencies are quite a big area in terms of definition, and people's ideas of efficiency are different. If you're looking at power in, power out efficiency, then you know with hydrogen you need an electrolyzer to convert the electrons when they're available and convert them into hydrogen and put them into a store, and then you would create electricity from that store via a fuel cell or a turbine or an engine or something like that. And depending on the efficiency of your reconversion, it'll vary. The optimum proposition for hydrogen is really power in, energy out, and that energy being in a form that can be utilized in a way that facilitates decarbonisation in terms of, well, for transport, for instance, whereby with fueling, you can fill up a vehicle in 3 minutes as opposed to charging for hours. So, you know, it's a great way of transporting energy. In terms of the gas distribution network that was mentioned, I mean, the biggest challenge with the gas network is you're putting a high value gas into a low value gas. And so the economic case doesn't stack up at the moment, albeit you could argue decarbonising the gas grid, but it needs incentives to do that in tariffs. The opportunity, there was a second question you had too. I know network. So
yeah.
In terms of projects, in terms of working with community energy associations, I mean, we've done a lot of work in Scotland on Orkney with Big Hit, and that was an ITM developed project. We sold a system to EMEC. We developed the surf and turf project there. So looking at ways that hydrogen can be utilised on the engine, on the islands, via fuel cells, by transport, using the heat, to look at multi-application. And I think, you know, when you're looking at viability of hydrogen schemes, hydrogen projects, if you could have more than one application, so transport, heat, maybe a bit of excess power regeneration, backup power or something, then you know you stand a better chance of a project viability. But scale is so important, and you know, if there is a group of, you know, if there's a community that wants to set up, it's the critical decision to whether it's going to be a hydrogen success or not will be scale and that proximity to market.
Thank you.
Can I just jump in a little bit on the efficiency as well? I think a lot of people get hung up on the efficiency side of things, but no one compares that to the efficiency of what we have today. You know, if you're pulling electricity out the wall, you're losing what, 60 to 70% of that in the transmission there straight away, and no one thinks about that. And then similarly, if you're you know, the minute you jump into your internal combustion engine as well, again, they're looking at about 30-35% efficient there as well. So I think people get very hung up on it, but don't think about, you know, today's efficiencies at the same time.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Thank you, Beth. That is a very good point. I've been scrolling through and I've lost track of which questions. Has anybody, I think we've got time for one more question. So Chris, did you see, who should we give the question to? It looks like Nick's eager. Nick Rouse from Avesco is very, very eager to ask a question. So I'll hand it over to Nick because I can see him.
Yeah, one of the advantages of battery vehicles over hydrogen is you can charge them up at home overnight. And or at your place of work. You can put in charging units now very cheaply and easily, so everyone can do it. There is no real prospect of ever producing hydrogen at home or at a small company. Is this, and something like 80% of all present electric cars are charged either at home or at the place of work. Is this not a problem with hydrogen cars?
It's, well, first of all, the viability of home charging and you know, en masse scale is going to be a huge challenge, because the low voltage network was built for kettles, not for charging cars. So while we've got a low adoption of battery electric vehicles, then fine, and home charging, you can get away with it. But it's a real challenge on the network. If everybody had an electric vehicle and decided to plug in at home, you know, really would be plugging into a blackout. So there's big challenges there.
If you charge at home, you can charge slowly at 3 kilowatts overnight, which is just about the same as an electric kettle.
Yeah, I mean, it very much will depend on, you know, if you look at duty cycles for business, unpredictable journeys, and the distance that vehicles have to run, it's for certain people with predictable journeys and fine, but for businesses, they need to fill up quickly. They don't need disruption to routine, and that kills business cases, and it's a real challenge. So you know, the beauty about the hydrogen is we can make it at a refueling station, or you can fill up in 3 minutes, just like you can a normal petrol station, and away you go, and you've got a range of 300-400 miles. So, you know, it's completely no compromise, clean emissions to what we're used to and what business and society is used to. So that's my push for fuel cells. And Beth, I'm sure.
Can I jump in a little bit as well?
Yes.
Yeah, I would say that a lot of people tend to pit batteries and fuel cells against each other in a whole kind of, you know, who's going to win out. It's a VHS Betamax type scenario. It isn't that scenario. It's very much going to be horses for courses. If you are an individual and you only need a small vehicle, and you have, you know, as Charles mentioned, if you've got known routes and if you can charge at home or work, great, get a battery vehicle. I'm a fuel cell person through and through, but I'd get a battery vehicle for me, frankly. Knowing the journeys that I do. I think it comes into its own when you're talking about heavier vehicles, when you're talking about fleets. If you're a fleet manager, you know, doing logistics, and you know, you're tasked with making the most out of your fleet assets. If you have to have half of your fleet on charge at any one point in time, you'll have to double your fleet size. And that's when it starts not to work, and when hydrogen starts to come into its own. And similarly, things that are heavier, so single decker buses you can currently run on a battery, but you can't run a double decker bus because the weight and the volume takes up so much that it becomes pointless. Whereas you can run a double decker bus on a fuel cell today. So, you know what I mean? It becomes a horses for courses proposition. It isn't either or.
Thank you, Beth. Right, well, I think that segues very nicely into thanking Charles, the elusive Charles, who we can't actually see.
I'm so sorry about that. Yes.
For his time and his contribution. Charles, thank you so much for telling us about quite a lot about hydrogen. My head's still reeling a little. I know that you have to go shortly, so I just want to thank you, and we'll just give you a little thank you. And we will hand over to Beth now, if that's okay with you, Beth. And
well, thanks very much.
Well, thank you. There's lots of
Charles
in the chat box. So, Charles, if you have a couple of minutes and you have a scroll of the chat box, and there's anyone else you want to reply to, please do.
Okay, I've really got to push on to my next meeting, but really, thank you very much for your time. Nice to meet you all, and Yep, good luck with your projects.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
So Beth.
Righty. Yes, I'm up. Hello. So I will thank Charles as well. We've known each other for a long time. The hydrogen and fuel cell industry within the UK is quite small and a little bit incestuous at this point in time. So we all know each other fairly well. My name's Beth Dawson and I'm a project manager at Fuel Cell Systems Limited. It is not a clever name. There we go. We are a fuel cell manufacturer. We are an integrator. So we buy in all different fuel cell systems from all around the globe, and we put all in the peripheral parts to make it a fully functioning system within the application. So that's what we do. And yeah, we can do all the monitoring and integrate it with existing renewables, things like that. So one of our key parts is the fueling strategy. What we found is that the issue with installations is never the fuel cell. They do what they're meant to do straight out the gate. The issue is always the fuel. So it's really prescient that Charles started on the hydrogen production side of things. So what's a fuel cell? A fuel cell is, I always refer to it in layman's terms as being a bit like a battery, but a battery that doesn't run with charge as long as you keep the fuel coming to it. And the reason I say it's a bit like a battery is that it's producing electricity electrochemically. So it's chemical reactions rather than any sort of burning. And the exhaust is pure water and a little bit of heat. And I'll explain how it works in just a second. It was first demonstrated in 1842 by this particularly dapper chap here, Sir William Grove, but it didn't have an application outside of the sort of benchtop interest until the 1960s in the space programs, when having a source of electrical energy on board was deemed to be useful. It works by stacking up fuel cell components into a larger stack, and you put the hydrogen in on the anode side. It hits a catalyst, splits into H protons, if you like, and E electrons. The protons can move across the internal membrane. The electrons cannot, and they are forced around the outside. Any flow of electrons is a flow of electricity. And on the other side, the protons, the electrons and oxygen from the air recombine to make water. But because those reactions are spaced out, you're not bringing hydrogen and oxygen in the same place at the same time, which is wise because that's when hydrogen is not so safe. People do worry about safety, and they don't need to as much as they do. Hydrogen is well understood as a molecule, as a gas, as a fuel. It's been used in industry for over 50 years now. One of the best things about hydrogen is that it goes skywards at 50 miles an hour. No, sorry, 45 miles an hour, and not an awful lot can stop it. And it's not even a greenhouse gas. It's so small and travelling so fast that it gets whisked away by solar winds, which is quite useful. So the point here is it's just power, and it's the equal and opposite reaction to electrolysis. So electrolysis is take water, run electricity through it, generate hydrogen and oxygen, and this is take hydrogen and oxygen, put them back together again, generate water and electricity. So equal and opposite. Obviously, the more changes to energy state that you make, the less efficient that in the entire cycle is. So if you can use renewable power directly, do that. But the issue then comes in with storage. But it is just electrical power. So anything that you can power with electricity, you can power by a fuel cell. The next point has to be, but then why would you? Why is it helpful? But the key here is that, as you know, I really like this infographic. I stole it shamelessly from newenergytreasure.com years ago, and I've used it relentlessly since then. The idea here being that electricity and hydrogen back each other up beautifully. So you can use excess electricity to generate hydrogen, and then you can use that hydrogen to generate electricity. So it's that helpful symbiotic relationship. And by doing that, it allows us to step away from the fossil fuels by making more of our renewable power. So taking excess renewables, so in times of excess wind, excess solar, you know, the solar peak in most countries is right in the center of the day, and that's when power requirements are generally fairly low. So, you know, once you've got the excess, don't spark it out and don't curtail your wind turbines. Instead, take your excess, use it to split water, hold your hydrogen, and then you've got it in reserve. You can store hydrogen for a long time, and then you can use it to power whatever you like. It's very flexible. There's lots of different types of fuel cells available. I'm not going to go into detail here, but you can get them from sort of any sizing, from very small right up to sort of megawatts for large buildings. And typically they're using a fuel that is either hydrogen or is very hydrogen rich. So methanol, propane, biogas and natural gas are all very hydrogen rich. To pop that same information into a table format, that's all I've done here. And then I'd like to talk about the sort of very low end of the power scale, first of all. So this is where the majority of our products and services currently sit, and that's because they are commercially viable today. So typically we're looking at methanol, some hydrogen, a little bit of propane. They look like this. They're helpful little units, and they, as I say, they're commercial applications. They work on their own 2 feet today. I noted that one of your customers is Network Rail. The grey box there is a signalling power source that is next to a railway line used by Network Rail. So these are typically using, as I say, either methanol or hydrogen. Usually there's some propane as well. But our main industry is CCTV towers here, and it's this is, you know, the part of our business that currently makes money, which enables us to invest in future bits as well. So the reason why you'd be interested if you're a CCTV tower manufacturer is when you've got a camera on a stick in a field and you're off grid. Having the fuel cell on board means that you can run it for about 6 to 8 weeks without any interference whatsoever, and it'll send you a ding 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 message when it's running out of fuel, which is really useful. And that absolutely just is above and beyond what you can manage with any sort of battery scenario. It's obviously more reliable than purely using on-site renewables, but it can be integrated with renewables too to extend that that period of autonomy even further. So a little bit of power in a weirdo place, that's usually where we tend to find an in. So the Environment Agency uses us as well. They've used us for bank erosion studies and fish counters and flood defence monitoring as well. They work in very cold weathers. This is 2 of our chaps out on the island of Svalbard. They had been looking to install a weather monitoring station on a bird sanctuary, so they weren't allowed to have any wind turbines, and obviously, you know, solar is not going to work over an Arctic winter. So yeah, so we provided them with 3 fuel cells and lots of fuel, and it kept them going for 6 months, which was perfect. And we got photos of the polar bear, which is pretty cool. And BBC have used us for wildlife filming as well. So this is like a little box power that can be used to set up something fairly low wattage. So these cameras obviously only come on when there's movement, but because they're very quiet and very low vibration, they don't disturb the wildlife at all. If you're using methanol, it's not entirely zero emission. There is a little bit of carbon dioxide. It's about as much as me standing next to it. So it's hard to get overly vexed about the emissions on that one. So now I'm going to jump right to the top end of the power requirement, and I suspect that this is where most of the interest in this virtual room will be. Unfortunately, this is an area where there's least activity at this point in time. So when we're talking about enough power to power a building, typically we're looking at systems that are powered by natural gas, so have to be on the gas network already, and the reason for this is about the volume of gas consumed. It just isn't particularly feasible to be trucking in that much hydrogen at any one point in time. However, the technology is such that, as Charles was indicating about when you increase the hydrogen within the natural gas stream, that these systems will absolutely love that, because they essentially use the hydrogen part of the CH4 molecule. And as and when, you know, we're talking about increasing that into 100% hydrogen gas networks, which is being trialled in Leeds, then again, the technology leap from going from natural gas to going to pure hydrogen, it's not ridiculous. It's you know, within reach, I would say. So they're really boring when they're fuel cells to power buildings. They just look like big boxes, sadly, but they do interesting electrochemical reactions, which mean that you can help to generate either part of a power solution, an entire power solution, or indeed a backup power solution. So the two buildings that I can quote to you that currently have fuel cells installed would be the Palestra building in London. That's the Transport for London head office, and also the 20 Fenchurch Street, or the walkie-talkie building as it's known. That also has a fuel cell installed as well, and it helps to improve the building BREEAM rating. But what I'd say is that these, well, the reason why you do this is that the emissions are simply on the floor compared to all other incumbent technologies using the same natural gas sources. So again, you're not going to get away from the fact that there's carbon in natural gas, but you're producing less carbon monoxide, less NOx, and less of those particulates as well. So yeah, the better air quality generally, again, low noise, low vibration, so that it can be used in a basement or on the roof of a large building. The heat exhaust is quite defined, so instead of it being like a traditional turbine where the heat is all around and trying to capture that's difficult because the heat is all in an exhaust, it's fairly easy to tap into in terms of thinking about district heating. So yeah, and you can have just the electrical supply or the combined heat and power. And indeed, when you've got one of these, you can also do tri-generation, which is where you'd have combined heat and power, but also take a feed of the hydrogen to be used for vehicle refueling. Once you've got hydrogen in place, you can start doing really useful stuff with it. So moving on to the section in the middle, which is the sort of the part where we're investing now, and it's the part where we're seeing most movement, I would say, at this point in time. And this is pretty much all hydrogen, and it's where all the transport applications sit, and some smaller buildings and things as well. So a typical fuel cell vehicle is about 100 kilowatt stack. A bus is typically around 200 kilowatts. It's all hydrogen technology, and it's about, as I mentioned at the beginning, the issue is not the fuel cell. The fuel cells do exactly what they're meant to do. The issue is the fuel. Where on earth we're going to get the fuel from? So this is an example of a building. This is our fuel cell education centre. This is situated next to the fuel cell, the hydrogen refueling station at the Honda plant in Swindon. This has an electrolyser that's generating hydrogen to dispense into cars, but because hydrogen's there already, we took a small stream of hydrogen and used it to power the fuel cell that you can see, the black box there. But the point there is that hydrogen was already available on site, which meant that we could easily access that to install a fuel cell. So moving on to hydrogen transport, again, I think people think it's far, far away. It's not, it's here today. So these are all hydrogen vehicles. We've got the Hyundai, Toyota and Honda cars there, as well as the buses, as I mentioned during the questions. You can get a double-decker bus that's powered by a fuel cell, which is a change from batteries. We're also powering the fuel cell train there, forklift trucks, drones, scooters, and then the two sort of commercial vehicles on the left-hand side there, the refuse truck and the transit van. Those are hydrogen dual fuel, so that's a standard diesel engine with hydrogen installed as a bit of a drip feed into the combustion chamber. And that allows the combustion reaction to be more complete, and it cleans up the exhaust out the back end. So not emission free, but lowering, which is a good start. So our thought was, well, if the issue is the fueling, and we're quite good at doing hydrogen installations, maybe we can help with the fueling side of things as well. And we've come up with a spectrum of products that we think can assist with that rollout of hydrogen across the UK and beyond. So at the very top end, you have the big static stations, and this is the kind of thing that Charles was talking about earlier. So the ITM type stations, of which, you know, there's around 12 stations in the UK currently that are publicly accessible. So not enough of them, but we think all and everything in between is feasible, from a hydrogen jerry can all the way up to the big static stations. The first thing we put together was our hydrogen refueling truck. This can store hydrogen to dispense at either 350 bar or 700 bar. So 700 bar is the cars, that's about 10,000 psi. 350 bar is for scooters, buses, forklift trucks, etc., and trains and anything larger too. So we refueled the Metropolitan Police scooters for 15 months, had over 500 filling events. They had a very small tank, but at the higher pressure of 700 bar. And that was no problem for us. And yeah, very pleased with that trial. It went very well. We also were involved with the launch of the Nexo in the UK. We used both our truck for that and also our hydrogen jerry can, which has been installed by the AA into one of their zero emission support vehicles. So they've got a fast charge battery charge on one side of the bulkhead and the hydrogen jerry can on the other. We did have to use it in anger because we went to Edinburgh and back and needed to get back to ITM station at Rotherham, and didn't quite make it and pulled over at gone midnight at -2 degrees and had to top it up, give it a to get it onto the next place to refuel. But yeah, all worked exactly as planned. We also built a second truck for the High Flyer refueling project. So Charles mentioned that they'd done a few projects with the guys in Orkney, that's the European Marine Energy Centre, and they were involved in the High Flyer project. It's still ongoing now, actually, with Zero Avia, who have built the Piper M-class blue plane that you can see there. But obviously they needed fuel for that. It's not readily available, so we put together a truck for them. And there's also a small on-site electrolyser in the green container as well. So you can scale down electrolysers. I'm not going to say that you get the same cost benefits or efficiencies and things like that. Most of these things will require funding. So at this point in time, because they're not commercially viable, they will get there, but we're not there today. Also refueling trains. So this is the Hydroflex train that's currently doing its testing at Long Marston. And this, we started refueling with the truck, and then we put together the basic high tube for them, which will dispense overnight. So it's sort of long and slow fill to try and keep the infrastructure down and keep the costs down. But yeah, it's all possible. Planes, trains and automobiles, literally, it's all possible to be fueled today. Okay. That's me. I'll stop sharing. Bit of a whistle stop tour.
Thank you, Beth. It was a whistle stop tour. I'm still spinning. There's a couple of questions that have come through so far, but I just want to see, has anybody else got? Oh, my computer's doing something funny. Has anyone else got any questions? Let's have a look. Otherwise. Oh yes, okay. I think Danny's question is
asking about combined heat and power and hydrogen in Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
He just wanted to know about that project. He'd heard of a project where for combined heat and power using hydrogen on an island in Scotland.
Sorry, it's a little bit more specific than that. It was using wood gas as a fuel for a CHP system, fuel cell. So it's a hydrogen carbon monoxide mix. And I was wondering if you knew of any more applications of using wood as a fuel cell source.
I haven't heard of that. That sounds quite specialist to me. And I would imagine that's got to be one of the high temperature systems, because CO would poison quite a lot of the lower temperature catalysts. So that must be one of the high temperature fuel cell installations. That's quite niche, and I haven't heard of any others, but I will be making a note and looking that up myself once we finish this call.
So Danny from Pecan says, what's the key ingredient to get the technology mainstream?
So I would say it's at the very small end, it's becoming mainstream already. Just that is, like I said, it's our main market. We're seeing quite a lot of traction there. So for a little bit of power in a weirdo place, come talk to us, because we're very, very good at that. And the commercials stack up today. And that's because of the increased autonomy. So you don't have to send a little man in a van every 2 days to either top up a generator or recharge a batteries pack or whatever. So on a whole of life basis, the financials make sense. So that's, I would say, mainstream coming through. I would say that the legislation is driving the mobility side of it at this point in time. And I think we're all aware that the government targets of ceasing petrol and diesel new car sales by, I think it's 2035 now. So, you know, with that coming, there has to be something else to take its place. And, you know, I am not against battery vehicles in the slightest. I think there's great symbiosis there as well from the drivetrain point of view, from the manufacturers. Once you've got an electrical drivetrain, the electric motor doesn't care where it gets its electrons from. If you want to pull them out the wall and store them in a battery, or if you want to generate them on board using hydrogen. So I think that's coming, and that'll be legislation driven. At the top end, when it comes to buildings, at the moment they all require funding. There's, you know, you can make the financials just work, but in terms of if you're a developer, why on earth would you do that when you can make more money off doing more traditional incumbent technologies? So I think it's going to have to require a bit of carrot and stick to move them from where they are today to where we need to be. So either that's going to come through planning permissions, or it will come through, you know, a legislative taxation type scenario, either pro the green stuff or minus, you know, negatively charging for emissions. It's something like that's got to come in.
Okay.
There are some more technical questions, but before we go on to the technical questions, I have a question, because we're here, most of the people here are from community energy groups. And so I'm interested in if there are ways in which community energy can participate, particularly given that historically community energy has got involved in the small scale, quite cheap end of renewables. But clearly there's a lot of interest because we've got so many people who've signed up. So clearly there's a lot of people who are interested. And I imagine there are lots of community energy groups that work with local authorities who are trying to decarbonise. So I don't know how much you know about community energy, but I'm just curious to hear your views on if you can see ways that our sector could be working with your sector. What we often do bring is interest in innovation and creativity, I would say.
Absolutely, and that's coming through in waves, frankly, from being involved in this call this morning, which is really good to see. I think what it would require is some form of jewel in the crown sort of project, a demonstration of some technology. So with the local authority involved as well, I've spoken to a number of local authorities, and they generally have an interest. But I would say something that is cross-siloed would be really quite special. So if we could, and you'd probably need a funding pot to do it, but there's plenty of funding pots that you know, you can tap into, either from Innovate UK or others within the sort of that family, or LEPs, and also the UK hydrogen strategy is due to be released this quarter, and I would imagine that once that's been released, there should be more funding pots available after that. But something that allows, you know, once you've got hydrogen, you can do interesting stuff with it. So if you had some form of project that maybe did backup power for a local authority servers, say, and or had a small fueling station for some of their fleet vehicles, you know, something that's sort of a cross-purpose thing. So I think you'd need to have a group of interested people coming together. You'd need to find some money to do it, but you know, anything you want to do is technically feasible today. It's just not financially viable. So it's finding a way to sort of walk that path between something that's useful and is a really useful demonstrator for your community. Because I think a lot of the challenges that we face with general public are that hydrogen is misunderstood. People think, you know, hear hydrogen and think Hindenburg, you know, that was an air disaster 80 years ago. We need to step away from that. It's been used successfully in industry for decades. You know, it's produced at 65 million tons per annum around the world and used very safely. So, yeah, but you know, integrating it into a community, I think, has got to be a positive thing.
Thank you. Right. Okay. So we've got Andrew. Andrew from Braintree says, "Do you want to speak, Andrew?"
Yeah, I can do. We'll just switch on. There we go. Yeah, because we've got a large premises here, and obviously we've gone solar PV and looking at wind. We've got another site opposite which we've got our eye on, and there's a partnership with National Grids, Network Rail, and a few others coming on. But the local authority freighter yard is next door. So whether they put loads of tanks or whatever it is I need, because you need the large storage, and then let them get their green freighters, whether there's an opportunity there for the community energy to own that, and then help the local authority to go green in that respect, because it's that opposite.
That sounds really interesting. Yeah, I think anything where you've got sorry, I think your phone went just at the time when I was trying to catch onto the interesting bit there. But things like if you have a site which has got forklift trucks, again, you can forklift trucks are available today with hydrogen. They work really well, and in fact you get better uptime, and you can again make a financial case. It takes about 8 years, and you'd need to be doing 24/7 operation with forklifts, which not every site does, but there's things like that you can make the financials work. Once you have hydrogen there, you can do useful stuff with it, be it filling buses, filling cars, filling whatever, and you can take feeds off to power stationary applications as and when that's interesting or appropriate. So it's things that can demonstrate that flexibility, I think, are key. Am I answering your question, or did I miss the thrust of it?
Well, it wasn't really a question. It's more of the opportunity, because if obviously you're looking for projects and you're looking for potential, because we're one who will experiment. So we've worked closely with Essex County Council over the years, and it started off evaluate solar panels. We're being told that they work underneath 10 foot of snow. Yeah, okay. They work in moonlight, all the usual myths. So we put them here, and we do stats to the nth degree, and then people can come have a look. I've got a substation sitting right next to me here, 11 kV. The DNO's been really good, which is UK Power Networks, because I worked with them to get the connections through. Then Essex wanted batteries testing, then they want, and so on the list went, and that way they get an unbiased opinion and actual figures.
Yeah,
it's the partnership that's available. So it's a case of, if this authority wanted to look at hydrogen, say, if we put something in and said, here, trial this, and we'll build you the community energy could build using the negative energy overnight, for example, that would otherwise be thrown away, because I can program that. I've got
that sounds perfect.
I built myself, and that effectively is talking to the grid constantly, and then we get told what you can have when you can have it. So you use the stuff that's thrown away, you get paid to do it. And otherwise, when the sun's shining, even today it's dull, but I'm getting quite a lot of energy off my roof. So there's plenty here. And down the road, obviously, we've got the first UK all-electric forecourt, which is GridServe.
I'm going to intervene there, because it sounds like that might be the makings of something really fruitful and exciting. So, and it's
definitely
well connected there. It sounds like you're really well connected there. We've got more questions, and we're really running out of time. So I'm going to hand over a question to John Taylor, because a couple of people have asked about water quality and water issues. So John Taylor has a question about that. And then I can't help but notice that Matthew Bird also has comments about refuse trucks. So, and it looks like this might be a nice space to explore possibilities. So I'll go to John and then Matthew, please.
Hi there. Yeah, I'm just curious about the water resources needed for the electrolysis process. Does it have to be fresh water from the grid, or can it be seawater, or how's that shaping up?
At present, I mean, you can use seawater, it's just that your equipment won't last very long. So it makes sense, ideally, to use potable water. And there is there's what do you call it? Water purification module before it goes into the electrolyzer. So you are looking for fairly pure water. So that's where we're at the moment. So we don't try and compete with ITM. They're doing the really big stuff. But when it comes to like the smaller electrolyzers, we like those installations. So we've been using we've got one that's quite remote, so that we've been using IBCs that are filled by mains and then taken across the field to where it's needed. So, but like I said, they've got the water purification module, which obviously the swap out for that will be dependent on how many impurities you're taking out of that water supply. So, if it's mains potable water, you'll probably only have to swap it out every, I don't know, 2 years or something. Whereas if you were trying to use something that was a bit dirtier, then you might need to A, boost it in the first place, but B, you might need to swap it out more often. So that's where we're at the moment. Theoretically, I mean, we're quite early days in electrolysis as yet. So theoretically, I think there's ways of getting hydrogen from seawater. I'm certainly aware of a small company, a startup based at the Harwell site, who are doing catalyst pellets that you can drop into seawater that will then split into the hydrogen and oxygen. So, you know, there's ways and means. It's just we're very early days, I would say, and this is good because it means we've got a lot of headroom to go. So watch this space. I think there's more and more coming as we progress.
Nicola's just made an interesting comment about water. Do you want to add that in, Nicola?
Hi there, thank you. Yes, I was just wondering if effluent from sewage treatment works could potentially be used as the potable water source. So just at the point before it gets before it hits watercourses, because then it's a relatively clean state. And I wonder if you could combine this sort of technology at the sewage treatment plant sites.
And even better than that, you can also take a methane stream from your sewage treatment plant as well, and then that becomes your feeder gas for potentially for a fuel cell as well. So certainly I know that that's been done. There was one within Central Park in New York City that they'd attached a largish fuel cell onto a sewage plant there. Water treatment, they all call it, don't they, just to make it a bit more palatable. But yeah, so certainly I think there's scope there, both in terms of water going into electrolysis and methane going into a fuel cell. So yes, yeah, it's about hooking all these things up, and we're just not there yet.
Yeah, but in terms of a cookie cutter approach, that could be very efficient because you could replicate that everywhere. Thank you.
Correct, absolutely.
Okay, so I'm handing over to Matthew and then to Gordon about his question about fuel systems, carbon life cycle analysis, and then I think we're going to have to end. So yes, over to you, Matthew Bird.
Thanks, Liz. Yeah, I wasn't expecting to comment, which is why I have my camera off. I'm on a day off today, but I just thought it was really interesting what Beth was saying around the fact that, you know, the technology is there, you know, and it's all possible, but it is some of those other barriers. And I find it I mean, it's such an exciting time at the moment. I remember sort of 15 years ago, we had a little sort of hydrogen kit car that we used to go into schools with, and look where we are now. And I'm a councillor at Lewis District Council, and you know, we're having a lot of conversations and looking at decarbonisation of our fleet, and through Greater Brighton Energy, Greater Brighton Partnership, a lot of local authorities have been talking about hydrogen, and you know, excitingly, we've got the Hydrogen Sussex partnership launching soon. And I see that Shoreham are sort of entering into a partnership to sort of look at hydrogen development. And we've been having a lot of conversations, as I say, with our fleet and in New Haven. But it does feel like it is the funding, and it is the issues around procurement, timescales for fleet vehicles. But you know, getting those partnerships into place, that seems to be the real barrier at the moment. And one thing I did mention in the comments was that it felt to me that, you know, we and it's something we were talking about at Great Brighton for quite a while, that there's this opportunity to use excess wind power from Rampion, from the Rampion wind farm, especially considering they're potentially doubling in size. And we spoke to them a few months ago at council, and they just did not seem to be into that at all. And if they were looking at hydrogen, it would be for domestic property, so it would be for heat rather than transport. So I was just wondering,
which means that they're probably looking to jam it into the natural gas grid rather than looking to transport it as a pure molecule, which is fine. You know, it does decarbonize the gas grid. There's no, you know, that's a positive thing to do.
Great.
And it requires less infrastructure. So, you know what I mean? And this is one of the benefits about hydrogen, and why it's so helpful and flexible, is that if you overproduce it, you can jam it in the natural gas grid. You know, certainly the ways that we're producing it at the moment, the levels we're producing it at, we're currently restricted by and I say we is the greater we, it's not us specifically, but we're restricted by the UK limits at the moment, which I think is 0.1% of the natural gas stream can be hydrogen at any given point. Obviously, it disperses quite through the CH4 quite well, but as Charles was saying, that there's thoughts to take that up to 20%, and certainly the HSE have come up with a study that says you can go to sort of 7 or 8% in the UK gas grid with zero effect whatsoever on any of your domestic appliances. So you know what I mean? It just feels like, if rather than literally waste energy by curtailing wind turbines or grounding it out from solar farms, do something with it. I don't care what it is. Just if we have an opportunity to use that and to help decarbonise, great. Let's take everyone we can, every opportunity.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Beth. Right, I'm going to hand over to Gordon for the last question, because it seems quite an important question. But before I do, I'm really conscious we might be going over time a little bit, and some people, people are already beginning to leave. So I just want to say, you can save the chat, because there's lots of useful links in there and lots of useful questions. So before you go, if you click on the three little buttons at the top of your chat box, you can save the chat, and that might just be useful for you. So now I want to hand over to Gordon to ask his question.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks, Beth. Very interesting. One of the key things, I'm a community energy director of a couple of systems, and very much interested in to see if we can use these for augmenting a community energy system. But what's always lacking, and I've worked with hydrogen and gases for 30 years, and I've worked a lot with Linda on the compression side and things. And it takes an awful lot of energy to compress the gas to make it suitable for transportation. And so what's really needed is a very clear life cycle analysis from the companies producing in this area. And I think your area of related to fuel cells is great, and that's much more likely that we'll be using that route rather than anything to do with heating and gas, because that makes no sense whatsoever when you look at the whole picture. But do you publish, or could you make available for your different options life cycle analysis in terms of the total carbon footprint needed from beginning to end? And then we might be able to make a clearer decision on all of this.
I think our issue is going to come in, certainly from the fuel cell perspective, is that a fuel cell doesn't care where it gets its hydrogen from. As long as that hydrogen is nice and clean, the fuel cell doesn't care. It's a molecular thing. So the issue is more where your hydrogen is produced. So in terms of we've got a number of different analyses that we can run on fuel cell systems and where they might sit. Well, that's it. That's basically our entire job, is to match up customer power requirements with systems that are available on the marketplace that will be appropriate for their use, including the fueling strategy, because that's the key in making it work well. So that's where we come into our own, and I'm sure we could run stuff on that section, but the bit that's going to absolutely make it or break it in terms of the carbon is going to be where your hydrogen is produced. So if your hydrogen, as 95% of it in the world is produced today, is via steam methane reforming, your carbon footprint is going to be hideous. Whereas if your hydrogen is produced via the ITM method, the electrolysis style, then it's going to be on the floor by comparison. So that's going to have a much greater impact, I would say, than anything further upstream. And I think that our goal is that we do use hydrogen that's produced from major gas companies at the moment, the majority of which will be via steam methane reforming, because we see that as a step on the path because it makes sense today, and it enables you to start, and then the electrolysis side can be brought in at a later stage, or as as part of your modular expansion as you're moving forward with time. So it's not a very helpful answer, I'm afraid. I think we can get you half the way there, or a quarter of the way there. But I think that the key is that we start holding the gas companies to account and asking them what their carbon life cycle analysis would be on their hydrogen production.
Okay, thanks.
Beth, sorry, it's not great.
Actually, I think that's a really good answer. I mean, it's a really clear answer, and it demonstrates that what we could do next with is a bit how we have our efficiency ratings on our fridges and freezers. We could do with a rating on the carbon. I'm sure there'll be lots of people up for creating that up in London, and lots of people objecting to it.
That too.
So I just want to say thank you very much, Beth. Thank you everybody else for coming along. It's been a very full morning, actually. My head's slightly spinning. I don't know how everyone else is. And yeah, thank you so much for your time, Beth. Really appreciate it.
No problem. I enjoy doing bits like this. Just one quick thing for Matt before I depart. One thing I meant to say to him was that I have forwarded a hydrogen and fuel cell lesson plan to Liz. So it's a free resource that's available on the CES website. So it's a resource for teachers who are doing GCSE science modules. And you said that you were working with schools. If you get the opportunity to fling that link at any of your schools that you're working with, do it, because they're starved of resources, bless them. And it's a fairly new module within the last couple of years. So I think it contains a couple of videos which are really useful, and some worksheets and stuff like that. So yeah, that's just an extra resource that I meant to mention earlier.
Lovely. I'll put it on our website so everybody who works with schools can access it. So yes, thank you very much. And thank you everybody else for participating. We're going to probably in March, having thanked you, Beth, I'm moving straight on to the next thing. We're probably going to have gas network speak in March. So then we'll look much more at hydrogen for heating, and if there are opportunities for community energy to get involved. And thanks very much, everyone.